looks like you got sunburn. Can you hear us, Andy? Can you hear me now? Can you hear us? How about now, Andy? Okay, good deal. All right. Thank you all for being here for this committee meeting. We have a couple of things to discuss, a couple of potential properties, and we'll start with the first one. Would be the current courts building downtown. As you know, we have two judges, district court there, and they share one facility. The greatest concern seems to be from our downtown merchants in that it takes up a lot of parking, and I would have to agree with them. Jamie has been in contact with some realtors. Y'all know the old publishing building, the publishing building that's just north of Smith Ford there on Museum. It appraised for, Jamie got an appraisal for it. It appraised at 1.4 million. It has two separate rooms, so each judge would have their own courtroom, and it has 145 parking spaces. And visiting with Mr. Winningham, we have $1.7 million in CARES Act money that we could use for this, so that would keep us from having to use the general fund revenues for that. Jamie she has not got a solid price on this. The estimates, it would leave us about $300,000 over. We think our remodel would cost somewhat more than that, but that's where first y'all got to figure out if that's what you want to do, and if we decide to proceed, if you give me permission, then we'll start working that in. But then we need to decide what we want to do with the old courts building. There's several options. We could retain it ourselves and probably move IT downtown because they're spending a lot of time running back and forth from west end of town. We could sell it. I know of 3 different people that are interested in buying it. Or if we moved IT downtown, we could either keep or sell the building out west. I'm just kind of big on us keeping our own property. That's just me, but I will do whatever this council wants to do. The downside to us keeping it is it'd leave us probably a little bit short on remodel. So, and then I know there was some concern that if we sold it, that we might lose those parking spots. Actually, the parking in front of the building would still be there. It would just be those parking spots that are directly in the parking lot. So once we get, if y'all decide to move this direction, once we get court out of town, I think a lot of parking places will probably open up. So that's kind of my take on it. And Jamie's here, and Tyler Winningham's here to answer any questions y'all may have.
I kind of like the idea of selling the out west.
Yeah.
Keeping downtown and selling IT, at least moving IT downtown.
Okay. I think it's a good piece of property. Somebody'd like
Do
to
we have any estimates about the cost of upkeep and stuff? The cost of the upkeep for the new building?
We do not. We can get that from Centerpoint, Conway Corp.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's the differences in the sizes?
Jamie, do you know the difference in the sizes?
Come on up.
Really good and ideal place for them in their ideal building. Because it has a 2 courtrooms, we would be adding on to the back of the facility where the big parking lot is, to make a secure entrance to all courtrooms, that type of thing.
Okay.
I definitely think it's a long desired ideal to move that court from out of downtown for a lot of reasons. And so currently, state the obvious, we have 1 courtroom in the current building downtown, is that right?
That's correct.
And move to 2. So I assume that would make things more efficient for all those involved in the process, including those who have to appear in court. That sounds like a winner for everybody.
Okay.
County?
Okay. First of all, since I've dealt with it, do we have enough room for the other offices over there? And number 2, the judges don't have court the same day because they're district judges, they work up north as well. So they're not there at the same time. And do we have enough parking for all these people out there? they got 4 or 5 different things going in over there at the courthouse, district court. Do we have the offices for that out there? Okay,
And the parking would almost double, and it has 145 parking spaces up there, so it wouldn't increase.
So the space out there, does that include the city attorney's offices moving out there?
No, Charles wants to stay here with us. He likes us.
So is that sufficient to be back and forth like that? Since-
I'll let
I
Ms.
know
Stevens-
that was one of the reasons that the city attorney didn't move into City Hall, was they wanted to be right next to District Court.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I do think that was Chuck's position, and it carried over. That was mine as well. I don't think it's going to present too great of a hardship on my folks to go over to court. We have court appearances 2-3 times a week, and I mean, they'll have to do a little bit of traveling, but we do a lot in circuit court as well. And of course, that's over on South German Lane.
So we wouldn't want to count selling the city attorney's building as a possibility.
We could, if Charles wanted,
And he would move where then?
out there, there's room for his office out there as well, according to the judge. What did Charles's building appraise for, Jamie? Okay. So if that's what the council wants to do, we can move forward with that as well.
If we moved IT to the current court building, then they move the room, move control to there and settle a little bit. That way, still free up work for a new.
That would reduce the emergency.
I'm sorry, you turn right on. IT box, all that square footage in the old court building.
I don't have the exact square footage of the current IT building, but I would think that would reduce it for sure.
Mayor, could we rent any of the extra parking spaces to downtown business owners in that lot if we kept the property?
I don't know, we've never done that before, have we? I don't know, Mary, I
I
don't know.
mean, that's an
But
option,
I do know if there's three business owners that are interested in the property.
because they're minus some, I know one of them is
Yeah.
liking.
Parking.
Parking.
Yeah, but hopefully court will release some of this, if it moves.
Right, because IT and the city attorney's office don't have a lot of foot traffic and a lot of
Yeah.
parking with people and things like that. I do have one question about, one of the options is using CARES Act money.
Mhm.
Is that part of the 6.2 million that you talked about?
No, that's the first money we got.
The first money?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, the second money's rescue money.
Okay.
What else can the CARES money be used for if it's not used for this?
Mr. Winningham?
So the CARES Act, the way it was structured, it was given as a repayment or reimbursement to cities for expenditures related to COVID. So really what it did is just pay us back for expenditures that we already had in the budget. So it's just general fund money at this point that can be used on any general fund purpose.
So it would come out of the general fund balance?
Yes.
Is where it would come out of?
And that was all overtime, any overtime or anything like that we would have been out, the city was out for anything was.
It was we used it for reimbursement of salaries of frontline workers. So our police officers, just the officers, no sergeant, lieutenants, and then firefighters, no engineers, captains, or anything, just the frontline workers that were actually face to face with the public dealing with COVID.
So Robbie, thanks to the mayor, shared with me the list of the other CARES Act money that we've only received half of what we're probably
Rescue
going to
funds.
get, the rescue funds. And it really has broadened. And that would be a great document, I think, to share with the whole council, because I think at some point we need to kind of sit down and talk about how do we want to prioritize using it? Because it really has opened up in a lot of ways. I think there's quite a few more options.
Yeah, and what we're waiting on, and we're supposed to get that in September, is the Treasury Department's final version on what it can be used for. This is gonna be, the rescue money, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tyler, is gonna be a lot more like a grant in that we're gonna have to have public meetings and public input and also document and show where this money is being spent, because any city that, I know a lot of cities are already talking about, we're gonna spend it on this, this, and this, but, there will be some audits on this, and if we do not do this right, then we'll end up paying the federal government back. But once we get that final documentation, it will come to y'all, and it'll be y'all's decision.
Will we have any more expenditures related to COVID? You think that we would need to use some of this money for?
The CARES Act money?
Mhm.
Well, I mean, like I said, essentially, you know, we've claimed and said that that's what we used it for, was to reimburse the salaries of those frontline workers. So at this point, you know, it's just a budgetary.
I was just thinking if we did another shot clinic for a third vaccine, is that something we would do?
We did
would
that,
do it in
Chief
December?
Winter did that today.
Okay,
Yeah, he,
for the public?
yeah, they've had, Mike and them's had 2 in the last 2 weeks, I think. I'm not sure about that. He'll be here later, but I know he had one today at St. Joe. It seems like they had one about 2 or 3 weeks ago at St. Joe as well. But I can get you an exact number on that. No, not the third vaccine. No, this is just continuing what they're doing right now.
And let me clarify something. I'm all for moving it from over there because it needs to be out of downtown. But it's more in that building, and I want to make sure we can do the same out here, because if it's not, we'll have to put some offices in there. It's gonna take some more than you think for fixing it. That's all that I'm saying.
No, I don't disagree with that.
I think we need it downtown, but we don't wanna go out here and spend a whole lot of money. We need to find exactly how many offices they got over there, and do they have, I haven't been in the building out here, so I don't know what you're talking about. But if it's comparable, but over here, I'm 100% for it.
Isn't the one that's right across the street from where the Interfaith Clinic used to be? It was like a call center or a public, yeah,
Yeah.
it's that one,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think Judge Clausen, I can't speak for Judge Carnahan, but I know Judge Clausen walked through it and said it would fit their needs. But I've not walked through it, Theo, but I agree with you. We do realize we're gonna have to do some remodeling for it too. I've asked the judge, yes, sir, Mr. Hawkins.
Is this just, we're talking about just moving, city courts, is that correct? So it has nothing to do with the county?
No, this is district court. So it is the county, and I did make a call to the judge about that, and he has not gotten back with me at this time.
Who estimated,
Is input down before.
who guesstimated the remodel cost at $1 million? Is that something we brought someone over there to look at it already?
No,
or-
we just took worst case scenario and plugged that number in. I don't really think it'll be that much. Judge Clausen didn't think it'd be that much too, but I would rather err on the side of, and you know how my guesses
I
are.
just hope it's
They're
not
never
like
close.
$2 million. And
No,
we
no, I
really
don't,
underestimate.
no, I don't think so. But before we can, Jamie can probably get some contractors to go out there and take a look at that.
I think it'd be a plus, get it from over there, because we have inmates over there, and I'd rather for them not to be downtown in this area, because a lot of them over there not in there, not over there for traffic tickets. See what I'm saying? I'm just serious, and I think it would be better in another location. I'm just hoping we can fix it where they can use it and not have to keep coming back trying to add something else. That's wrong.
You raise another really good point, that ties back to making sure the county buys in, is that's further distance for them to transport.
Well, I talked to the chief deputy today. I talked to him about it, and I was telling him that we proposing moving it out there, and asked him, what would, how would it bother them on transport? And he said, we'll do whatever we have to do. So I guess they're on board with it. They figure they can't rebuttal anything, but I'm just saying it would be better, because we've had we had a couple of incidents over there that it would have been better not to have been downtown.
Jamie, were there any other options as far as new locations that you looked at?
We did look at all the commercial property available in Conway, and there's just not a whole lot right now. And both of the judges thought that was the best location that's available right now.
And I even called the judge and asked him if he'd be interested in selling the property that they had bought where the CID has moved into temporarily, and he said he felt like the county needed to hang on to that, and I understand that. So,
Hey, Jamie,
Yes, sir.
looking at square footage, I'm sorry, not able to hear a lot of what's been said tonight. Square footage in the building and parking availability.
Okay, the property is located at 1203 North Museum Road. The square footage is just over 9,000 square feet. The parking spaces are 145 spaces compared to, the big lot where the farmer's market is. We currently have 72 spaces,
and how many square feet is it bigger than the current building, Jamie?
about 1,700.
Well, what I think I'm hearing is it's, most people are generally in agreement with the thoughts, and I think this is probably a really good solution. It sounds like we probably need to get maybe a little firmer cost on remodel, talk to the county and see get their thoughts on it, and just kind of short some of these loose ends, but I love the idea of moving it.
I think with the idea of keeping the building
Yeah.
here,
Yeah.
the district court building we have here, under city control, and look at maybe selling out west if you
Yeah.
wanted to move IT.
I like that.
Because then they're closer to City Hall and
Felt like there were plenty of offices in the building already. The main addition would just be the security entrance.
Yeah, I think Judge Clausen had mentioned me, and you'd know this, Theo, that the current building, sometimes they have to bring people that have been charged with crimes in front of the kids that are going to be testifying, and that this would remedy some of that. I don't know.
Can't bring the inmates in the front door, they're not allowed to be around the people. So we're gonna need a secure entrance in the back for them. But I think it'd be a great idea if we had a place for the guys, the inmates to sit, other than sitting right out there in the open like that. And that would be great.
Okay. Well, it's up to you, but if the
I'm
council,
100%.
if the council decides to proceed with this, I can hook you up with the judges and you can work with them on it.
I'm for it, man.
Okay.
We should have moved, well, we shouldn't, I can't say we should have, but it would have been a great idea to have moved it a long time ago. And if it's as much room as you said, they might be able to go out there too. I'm talking about, city attorney now.
Okay.
I hadn't seen the building, and I'm not negative, but I would like to just get an eyeball on it.
Okay, all right. Any more questions on this building? Okay, the second property is the Axiom building that's located at Central Landing right now. Jamie has an agreement with them that if the city council decides that we are interested in that property, they will hold on to it until we have our bond issue election to see if it passes. And if it does, if the council so chooses, it's the big building. I forget how many square feet it is, but Ms. Whitmore was with us, and we walked through the other day, and the architect said that if we're going to go the community center route, where we're doing pickleball and volleyball and basketball courts, that this structure would serve it well, and it would actually be cheaper than building one from the ground up. They would also add they could also add an outdoor pool to the west side of it. I'm sorry, an indoor pool, closed area to the west side of it, and then we would have the outdoor pool in another location. But the what I would need from the council would be for us to let them know that y'all have approved us buying this building if it passes. And if you're not interested in it, we won't. I've got Mr. Welborn here tonight as well, who can answer any questions for you. Gordon, thanks for coming on short notice. I know when Felicia calls, you come. I understand. So there's several things that Gordon can probably answer for us, such as, can this building be included in the bond issue, Gordon, if we're gonna use it for the, okay, okay. So, y'all, does everyone know which building I'm talking about?
Well, let me ask this.
Yes, sir.
I like the thought,
Mm-hmm.
and it's certainly good to plan, but isn't it still a little premature in that we don't even know what we're
Oh, yeah,
doing
absolutely.
yet? I mean, so we're not entering into an agreement to
No.
say, hey, we're buying it if it passes.
No, we're just,
We're interested if it passes.
if y'all give me the okay, we'll say, yeah, we want y'all to wait to see if it
Okay,
passes.
all right.
That's
I'm
all
okay.
we're asking for. Now, we're not asking to buy the building, no.
Well, yeah, I knew that. I just want to make sure we're not getting too far ahead of ourselves.
No, and Mr. Winningham's got some things that y'all have got to know about,
All right.
so that everything is transparent up front. Come on up, Tyler.
Can I say something?
Yes, sir.
I'm the guy with the monkey wrench all the time. I'm sorry. I don't want this to be like, I'm just gonna say, a past, administration and wanted us to buy this building out by Walmart. We don't need to get in something to buy it just because somebody wants to sell it.
Oh, no.
I'm saying, that's just me, cause we went through that, rigmarole, went through the, and, no.
Yeah, well, I'm nothing like the past
I
administration.
didn't say you.
Okay.
Well, and I think Tyler addressed it
No, I'm not
in his
saying
memo.
you.
I was thinking we had to sell that
I do. We're good.
to pay for the hangar, the $1 million hangar that we're buying.
That's what I want Tyler to educate everyone
Yeah.
about, because there's a lot of moving parts to this. And like going back to what Mr. Grimes said, we've not decided on location. We've not decided on what we're going to do. All I was wanting to do is get y'all permission to say, there's a lot of ifs attached to it, that if this bond issue passes and if the council chooses to go that way, would y'all hang on to it until after the bond issue? That's it.
And I do think it's a very intriguing possibility.
Okay.
So,
All right, Mr. Winningham.
You got me now? Okay. Yeah, so I tried to lay out these scenarios in the memo, and Mr. Hawkins, I'll send you a copy of this memo since you weren't present to get it tonight. But that Axiom building and the property does kind of present some challenges financially going forward. First of all, we get about a little over $100,000 a year in lease revenue from that building for it being on city-owned property. And at some point in time in the future, it looks like that's going to go away. It's either going to go away because Axiom sells the building, if not to us, to somebody else. And then at that point in time, I don't know what will happen with the lease in that transfer of ownership. I don't know if it'll transfer to the new owner, if we'll have to renegotiate or what. But at some point, that $100,000 a year is probably going to go away, and it's probably going to be sooner than later. So I think that is an issue here, and I think it's also an issue we need to talk about for the airport going forward and its financial stability. Secondly, like Ms. Mel was mentioning, that land we had intended on selling. The land that the building sits on is owned by the city, and we had intended to sell that and then use part of the proceeds from that sale to pay back the loan that we took out for building the new hangar at the airport. So if we decide to hang on to that property, or, it's not necessarily if we decide to, the CDC, I think, has an option to buy it. If they choose not to and it's still ours and we decide to keep it and use it for, some sort of city function, parks, community center, or whatnot, then we'll have to come up with general fund money to pay back that loan. And that'd be a little over $640,000 is what that would be.
Is there another parcel of land we own out there, or is that the only one at the old airport?
Is it 40 acres we own, Alicia, Jamie? No, we
Yeah, I don't
we
know
own
how
40
they-
acres that actually butts up to that, surrounds that building.
Yeah.
We own the property that the building sits on.
50? So the land just to the south of that
Yeah.
is city property.
Okay, and is that included in any obligation to the airport?
We don't technically have an obligation to the airport. that's kind of been a confusing, thing as well. When we were building the new airport and we were getting all the FAA grant money to build the new runway, taxi lanes, we had told them that at what point in time the new airport gets built, we'll sell the old airport, and the proceeds from that sale have to be put into the new airport.
Right.
We've done that. So anything out there now is property that is owned by the city, and if we were to sell it, then it just becomes a general revenue to the city. And where it gets tied up in the airport is we had kind of counted on selling that land and then taking that money to just repay the loan.
That's correct.
I'm sorry, just to be clear, we own the land under this building and 50 other acres.
The 50 total? I think that land and the land south is 50 total.
We've got some land with a building on it, a whole bunch of land with nothing.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Well, if we located the aquatic center over at the old airport property, could we sell the property out on South German and pay that loan towards that loan?
We could, yes.
If anybody would want it, but I'm not sure. But I don't know. Just
I've already kind of come to grips that we're gonna have to pay that $640,000 out of general fund either way, when, I mean, the CDC's not gonna exercise their option, and I don't know how many buyers there are for that property, so it's probably gonna happen either way.
I do have some good news, Mr. Hines. The shale in that pit, Knapp Hose Corporation estimated it's worth $2 million.
We'd like to buy it.
Yeah, it's got somebody who wants to buy it. We sell for that better in the
I
county.
think we sell it, you know, that builder, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, that was a plus. Okay, so,
Yeah, so thank you. That's all.
y'all have any, all right, now, off that subject, but still on the aquatic center, Gordon's here. Yeah, I feel like I've wasted his time if somebody doesn't ask him a question.
the only thing I see with purchasing the Axiom property, I mean, I feel like we're always trying to retrofit something we want to do in another building, where when we talked about initially, we were gonna do it clean slate, build what we want to build, and have it be that.
You
And
sure
now
you
I
still
feel like
can.
we're almost like, well, we can buy this, and then we can add this, and we can, I don't know, that's
No,
just my
No, it's
thought.
still y'all's decision. I just bring you the options.
Yeah, I understand. That's just my thought in buying that building and just doing it from scratch.
You know, I think if we do decide that, and I think when we talked about it before, that location was one that we all sort of liked. I don't want to speak on behalf of everybody, but I think if we did decide to go there, taking advantage of that building for something, you know, like you said, does it have to be pickleball courts or, you know, because it is a big, it's really tall and.
It has
It has-
electricity.
Yeah. I mean, I used to do United with camping.
It's got
there
still got
with-
power,
with
still got air
that-
conditioner.
With Axiom employees, and it's a big open
Yeah.
base.
And it's actually got offices into, but you know, but
And how much do we have any idea how much it would sell for?
I do, but they've asked us not to say. It's considerably
A lot.
less than what they're asking.
Well, it's not gonna cost us anything.
I'm sorry. Just a minute, Mr. Hawkins. I'm sorry. Jamie, who is
Does Axiom own the building and we own the land? Is that how, or?
I think that's right. Mr. Hawkins, go ahead with your question.
My question was to Mr. Fagenbacher I think we need to research a contract. We own that property, but Axiom has the building on it. I think we need to see exactly what the contract says before we get too far down this road. That's my opinion.
Yeah, we weren't locking in on anything tonight. We were just trying to give them some information as to we possibly might be interested in this.
Well, if we tell them they are, that'll give us plenty of time to do
Yeah,
our homework on it.
yeah. And if y'all aren't interested in it,
Well, I'm interested enough to pursue what we're talking about here,
Yeah.
just, I mean,
Yeah.
keeping it on the burner.
yeah, we still got to get this passed.
Yeah.
But I would like to take a tour of it if we're considering
Yeah.
doing, you know, the whole group of us to go and look
Sure.
at it.
Not a problem at all.
To see.
That and the new court building, museum court building. Let's just have a tour field trip. There you go.
Maybe that could be a committee meeting, we just go to those two places.
Yeah, we can start trading and that way everybody.
And you're buying dinner, right?
You know, last time I took you out, I had to take you to Mike's. Just talking about payback here. Felicia, would you, get Ally to set that up, please? Y'all remember Felicia? Gordon, is there anything, any wisdom you'd like to, give us as far as timelines,
that if we were looking at potential December election, that we would need the election.
Gordon, he can't hear you.
There we go. If we were looking at a December election, we would need the election ordinance adopted by your first October meeting. That would hit the state statutory requirement for notice to the election commission and so forth. I think we also discussed, this is a political and a legal question. If you want to put on the ballot where it's going to be located, that's fine. But if you do, that's what you're going to do, or you're not going to do anything. So the flip side is you don't have to put it on the ballot. It's, an open location, but, maybe you got to weigh, how that affects the election. So those are just questions, we'd have to answer before we get that election ordinance finalized.
That's a good point, and that location is more appealing to voters, and they would vote yes, because they like that location versus an unknown location.
Mr. Warren, can I get you to repeat your timeline again that you led with right there, this part of it?
Sure. And I'll go into a little more detail. The way and the law is going to change at the 1st of 2022, but right now you can schedule a special election in any month, and it will be held on the second Tuesday of that month unless there's another election going on, a general election or a primary election. You've got to have 60 days between the date you get that ordinance to the election commission and that election date. So that, without holding a special meeting of the council, that would be your first meeting in October would provide enough time. We looked at the calendar.
And with that, we will be shooting at election date of December.
Second Tuesday in December, whatever that is.
December 14th.
If you get into 2022, I'd have to look at the statute, but there are special months that you can have. You can't have it in any month. I think maybe 4 months a year or 2 months plus the primary and general election dates.
So maybe like March or something.
So
I'm like, yeah, I
we need to
can't.
be careful about questioning something, just to get it on a ballot on a specific date in calendar year 2021. I think it's a lot more important than we get it right and then we get it fast.
Mr. Ibbotson, Ms. Isby, then would one of y'all share us kind of our timeline on where you are with your public meetings and?
The architects have public meetings that will be this Thursday. There will be one at 5:30 and then another one, excuse me, at 7 to allow public input. What their plan is to show them some things that could be in an aquatic center. They had asked specifically if we wanted them to disclose the location or this location. My preference was that we just talk about it in general and let the public know that there is a possible additional location that we're looking at. So basically what they would be doing is just showing different things that could go in it based on the input that we had given them, and then to get some input from the public on different things that they'd like to see in it. So they would do those 2 meetings on this coming Thursday, and we're going to do that at the Expo Center. And then there's the second meeting, which will be September 16th, the same thing at 5:30, and then again at 7 for additional public input and showing them different things that could go into the center itself.
Thank you. Okay, good. Any questions before we move on?
The only thing I wanted to, and Gordon, when we had our initial meeting, we were talking about the bond issue and how we needed to address that based on looking at this possible location in regards to city-owned property and purchasing and all of that. Can you kind of explain that to the whole council?
Well, if you don't have a location going into the election, you probably, there's no definite case law on this, but you always want to be as descriptive as possible on the ballot. And you would say, you know, something like, you would describe the aquatic center or the community center, whatever it is, and you would say this, the use of proceeds may include the purchase of land, if you don't know that it's going to be on city-owned land.
Okay.
Is that what you were kind of referring to?
Yes, yes.
Hey, Gordon.
Yeah.
Do we know what our bond capacity is at this point? Do you have any idea about that?
I think your underwriters have answered that, but I don't remember. Something,
Do you know Mr. Winningham?
I've got a figure that rings a bell with me, but I remember that.
When we had them kind of run a scenario of what the debt service would look like, the number we were talking about was $25 million in funds for the project. The bond issue itself would be larger than that because there'll have to be a portion to pay back the existing bonds and then financing legal fees. And, but it'll be 25 million is what we've kind of talked about is our project money to spend.
When we put it on the ballot, I don't think we need to go with can and may, because people now, it's a trust issue and they really want to know what they're voting for and where it's going to be. So I think we need to let that go about may be here and we may do that. I think if we want this passed, they need to know exactly where the money's going. That's just my opinion.
I would agree with that. I know that Mr. Ibbetson's already getting some email comments from people, some good things. So, I think we're gonna have good general input from the public. I think the public's interested in it, and I think they want to be heard, so. Any other questions, Mr. Wellborn or Mr.?
Ms. Wilburn, one other item, Ms. Wilburn. Have you ever seen anybody do
I've probably seen one in every month. Yeah, that's, it,
usually decent?
you know, I think as with most special elections, if, you know, it's all a matter of the campaign of getting the people who are interested in the, whatever is being proposed to get out and vote. You know, we just, the same thing happens when you have one this summer. You worry about people being on vacation and not being there to vote. So I think there's a different concern with any month you choose, so.
Thank you, sir. This was not.
Sure.
Hey, council, do y'all have any questions about either of these items we talked about tonight before we bring up Mr. Walden? Come on up, census man. And Shawana, I see you here too. You come on up with Mr. Walden. We appreciate all your hard work. You don't want to get up? Okay.
Oh, no, it's too late now. It's too late.
Sorry, I had a PowerPoint, but I didn't know we were not all going to be in here of one accord, and so I apologize, Mr. Hawkins, that you won't get the benefit of seeing this, but I can email it to you. First of all, on the census, I want to give a little bit of a shout out to my staff, Matt Anderson, as well as Kyle Kelly. They have spent about the last week and a half diving into census data, and Matt has developed, our GIS manager has gone above and beyond just creating a whole plethora of GIS maps and digging into the data and identifying places where merging blocks and doing this. And it's been really illuminating. It's allowed us to take a real close look at this. In terms of looking at the 2020 census data, our population in 2010 was 58,908. And the decennial census numbers came back at 64,134, which is an increase of 5,226. Now, that is below both what the Metro Plan estimates and the 2019 census estimates were. So they projected growth of about 8,700 to 7,300 in terms of that. And so it is lower in terms of Faulkner County as a whole. I think it's below what was projected, the entire county. So we were below that estimate between 2,000 and 3,500. The city's growth between that period of 2010 to 2020 was 8.9%. Over a 10-year period, that's the lowest that its percentage growth that it's been since the Depression, but it's still positive growth. It's still a lot, yeah. The county's growth was only at a percentage of 9.1%, so it was only very slightly higher than what ours was at 8.9. That's because half the county is the city of Conway. And then overall in the region's growth was about 6.9%. So the region as a total, our six county region, I think, is at just about 750,000 folks. Overall, looking within the region, we had the largest numerical growth of any city in the region outside of Little Rock. So when you're comparing us as a city of about 64,000 to a city of 200,000, I think we still held our well pretty on in terms of that, the overall number of growth. If you look on slide 3, 2020 census up there, it's got population change. That area of South Conway, that is the area that had one of the highest percentages of growth in the entire region. So it grew at between 30 and 75% in that census tract. So there was a ton of growth there. Where we saw declines were basically in central Conway. That's where we lost population, was in the central part of Conway overall, those census tracts. So if you think near Oak and Harkrider, that's kind of the areas where we tended to lose population. On the next page on slide 4, if you look at racial characteristics, this was fairly interesting. And that's the only reason I would really report it, just because I like looking at data and it's interesting. When you look at the racial characteristics of 2010 versus 2020, there was in the total white alone population. So the way that the census records racial data, there's one, you can be of one race, two races, and then they separately report Hispanic. That's different than kind of the way the state looks at that, at least from a school standpoint, because you can be Hispanic and be of multiple races. So when you look at the racial characteristics from an overall standpoint, the white alone population declined by 1,569. The black alone population increased by 1,527. Asian population decreased, and the largest group where there was a gain in population was Hispanic, so 1,761. So that has altered the sort of the racial characteristics of the community and that. So it's pretty interesting. The next slide on number 5 shows the location of where all building permits over the last 10 years have gone in the city, which is a total of about 4,367 units. Largely, as you can guess, those have been primarily in West Conway, South Conway, and a smattering of infill development that has happened inside the sort of the center part of the city. A little bit of growth on the east side as well, with Museum Meadows and Matthews Meadows and those. So if you look at the number of single family permits between 2010 and 2020, there was 2,123. The multifamily permits, there were 2,244. That gives us a total of 4,367 units. The average household size, based on this census, is 2.33. So that's the average number of people that would be in a housing unit. That is down from 2.62 2 censuses ago, 2.52 last census. It's now down to 2.33. that's an overall trend of sort of households, our population getting older nationally, but also people having fewer children. So it's kind of a component of that. What's really interesting is if you don't account for any level of population attrition, any type of natural increase, any type of migration, anything, the assumed population change in the city would be a gain of 10,175 people. So that's pretty interesting. Our gain was 5,226. So it kind of leaves you with a question of in the numbers, what's going on in terms of the numbers. So immediately, one of the questions that we inevitably go to is looking at, okay, what's going on with the colleges? So when you look at the blocks where UCA was, there was actually a 12.7% increase in the population in UCA's blocks. So that's pretty good there. So we had good reporting there. With Hendricks, it went down 10.1%, but that could be, potentially expected with enrollment declines or things along those lines. The one that's interesting, I think, bears evidence of COVID is with Central Baptist. It's 146, and then what was reported in the census was 11. So that one is a very interesting. So in terms of looking at that data, so that part of it's not really, I don't think, really explanatory when you look just at on campus. I think when you start to look off campus and look at large apartment complexes and then various places around town, you start to see some story. And I think it's some combination of COVID related to school with some possibly inaccurate counts with our multifamily in town. And then I think there is probably some level of it that's just, you told me to do this and you said it's a good thing and I don't care, I'm not going to do it. And that kind of bears out in the data, and that's kind of been our theme for the last couple of years in this country, is whether it's a good idea or not, or just because you tell me to do it doesn't mean I'm going to do it. So if you look on slide 8, there's a block group there, which is some of Alan Shaver's new apartments that are over there. Additionally, it's between Oak and 6th and First Avenue in Ingram. I'm sorry, it would have been a lot larger on the screen, but it's an area where we've added a lot of development in the area. Despite that, that population block went down by 149 people. So that I think is very, very interesting in terms of looking at that. That's something that we need to explore further. Another is down at Donny, and everybody I always feel danged if I do and danged if I don't. If I say Favre or I say Favre, but Favre on Favre Lane and that block that's down there. Despite the fact that there were a few more housing units that got built, the reported population in that block went down by 54. And so what is that a component of? That's something that I think is pretty interesting there. And when you see this story play out in block and in another block and another block, it's very easy to see how, we could lose 5,000 people in terms of that. So I think that could be an example of people just saying, I'm not gonna respond to the census, whether you tell me to or not. Another on slide 10 on the final page there, this is out off on the west end of College, where I think Edgewood Park, that new PUD is out there. There were several new houses that were built out in that area. Despite that, the reported population in that block is down 70. So again, that's another example that I think highlights that. And then one that's really interesting on slide 11, and I think this is one that we really need to dig into quite a bit as well, is the Salter Centerstone apartments there along the Stonedown Creek Trail there on Dave Ward and Donny. You've got 2 blocks. You have a lot of those apartments that were built since 2010, and in that area, it shows a block gain of 378 people. But in the area where the existing apartments were, it shows a loss of 289. And so again, that's probably something that you could say relates to it. Although we got pretty good counts on campus, when you look at off campus, that may be where we're having some issues there with how things were recorded. And so that there's some ongoing discussions about how we approach that and look at that. Next steps, I think, are number one, to convene a working group on this. That would be headed by in the what the census says is our highest elected official. So it'd be headed by the sort of the mayor task force to work on that. We could work with local organizations such as the city, the chamber, Metroplan, Conway Corporation, all these people that have a vested interest in examining this, and then identify some of the qualifying discrepancies that would qualify for a census count question resolution that would have to be submitted by the city. That could be things where we find errors in their data with the number of housing units that the census reported back to us, or counts of group quarters. That could be another area as well. And then things what they term geocoding areas. So this is something that I think it's going to take some ongoing research to dig into. I think it's well worth the effort, simply because the amount of money that's on the line, if we can submit an appeal to that census count that presents data that shows where the census's information is wrong, that could be very beneficial to us. And then after we go through and all that research over the fall, submit essentially a census count question resolution to formally appeal that. So, any questions?
I would think Conway Corporation would be able to supply us with a ton of information about meters and things that are hooked up and operational.
Yeah, I think that they're definitely probably have a good trove of data. Additionally, working with some of our local community partners, like the Salters, Trinity Development, such as those, looking at some of those larger complexes where we have a lot of people, and just see, based on if they're willing to submit the numbers of folks that were there, not submitting names or anything like that, just totally anonymous data, that it might be something that we would be able to use to help challenge. So it's not going to be, it's certainly not a guarantee. It's not easy, but if we picked up 500 people, then we'd be number 2 in the region. We wouldn't be number 3 anymore. Yeah.
So we started the process on looking at what we can do as a city, and James and Shawan have been working well together. So hopefully we can get y'all some better information coming up. Or not better information, but hopefully come up with a better number when it's all over. Thank you, Mr. Wong. Judge Clausen, council, we've got about 5 minutes. I noticed you walked in. Do y'all have any specific questions for the judge concerning that building? Come on up, Judge. We got about 5 minutes. Okay.
I think we want to go see it too.
Well, it's worth a look. The building checks a lot of boxes. It's got its own parking lot. There's about 10,000 square feet. The agent told us that the interior walls are not weight bearing. They can be moved in any kind of configuration, which should kind of minimize the expense of remodel. And it would, the one thing that we had kind of hoped for it, it's not that close to the jail, but Mr. Jones can tell you, once you get them shackled and in the van, you can. It would help a lot of, we've always had the merchants downtown about the parking, and there's no waiting area. We have people, whatever the weather conditions, they're waiting out in the street. This building could answer that question, have that problem solved pretty well. And it's just, it's a good location, and I think it would, I would love to go out there and walk through it with any of you that have, when we could set up a time to do that. Get a field trip, you bet.
Theo's buying lunch.
Deal's buying lunch, yeah?
Theo's buying lunch.
But it's got, the thing about it, it's got two very large rooms on each end. Either one will make a good big courtroom. The other end could make a smaller courtroom and some more offices and some more storage space, which are things that we're gonna need. As this city grows, and we've already heard it's grown, there'll be more need and more options for the courts to address the needs of the public. I would be happy to, at any time, to go out there and take a look at it. We can get it arranged and show you through it and see. I've got some ideas about the way it could be reconfigured and remodeled to adapt for the needs that we have now and for future expansion.
Felicia's gonna set that up, Judge, so we'll be sure to include you and Judge Carnahan.
Yeah. Your folks had good luck in arranging those things. And Judge Carnahan couldn't be here tonight. He sent a statement I could read to you if you'd like to hear it. He is in Hoover, Alabama at a training seminar for his sobriety court and couldn't be with us, but he encouraged to allow the mayor to enter into negotiations and see. And I'm sure he would be happy to go out there anytime and go through the building and yeah. If you're gonna go to Andy's, you might as well go all the way and get the cherry concrete. Just be done with it and, you know.
You see what you done, Judge? I've lost control.
I'm sorry. I mean, call them to order and, you know.
All right. Well, Judge, thanks for stepping up, and
You bet.
Felicia's gonna set it all up, and we'll take a tour of it, and we'll let the council make a decision.
I think you'll be pleased with the configuration and the availability of it. The thing about it, you're talking about building a structure, you're talking down the line somewhere. This could be online probably within 6 or 8 months. Like I say, the beauty of it is it's got the big parking lot, and which is one thing that's been one of the problems with downtown for all this time. And it is, we wouldn't have, we've got about 3 different sets of folks sharing offices. So it checks a lot of boxes. All right.
Thank you,
Anything
Judge.
else?
Council,
Thank you.
it is,
Appreciate your time.
it's 6:28. Let's reconvene at 6:35. Give everybody about 6 minutes.
Testing audio, test. That should be able to be heard in the room and Testing audio, testing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Testing audio 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Testing audio 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Testing audio 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Testing audio 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Okay, everybody, if you are, let's get started. Okay. We always proceed each council meeting with a word of prayer and the Pledge of Allegiance. If you would like to, we'd love for you to join us. Miss Isby, could I ask you to word our prayer, please, ma'am?
If you'll bow with me. Our gracious Father, we thank you so much for the city that you have blessed us to be stewards of. We thank you, Lord, for all that you give us as far as the knowledge, and we just ask, Lord, that everything that we do will be pleasing in your sight, and at the end, we pray that you get the glory. In your name we pray. Amen.
Okay. Now call this meeting to order. Mr. Garrett, would you take roll, please?
Mr. Hawkins,
I'm remote, but I'm here.
Mr. Grimes. Here. Mr. Pruitt, Miss Mel, Mr. Ledbetter, Miss Smith.
Here.
Mr. Jones. Miss Isby.
Mr. Hawkins, I just have to know, is that just a red hue from your computer, or are you sunburned?
It's a red hue.
Okay.
It's only a red hue.
Okay. You should have received copies of the city council minutes for July 27th, 2021. Any corrections or changes or comments?
Make a motion for approval as submitted.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes as submitted. Any further questions? Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 8-0. Our first item on the agenda tonight is our monthly financials report, and this is going to end on July 31st. I think, Mr. Winningham, tell us what you got.
Yes, sir. Good evening, council. Sales tax in the general fund was another good month for us. I think I may have mentioned this at last meeting. We usually get the numbers right around the day of the second meeting. So these numbers are for July. We got August numbers today. I think they may or might have shared those with you. I don't know. But anyway, we're up 14.4% over the same month last year, and year to date that puts us being up about 14.5% as well. In dollars, that comes out to about 1.7 million. So sales tax has rebounded well for us this year. A couple other areas I might point out, permits. You know, we've talked about growth in the city tonight. You can see we've almost collected 100% of our permit revenue already. We're at 94%. And our expenditures in the general fund, they remain fairly well in check as well.
We've got a $1.4 million net revenue as of the end of July 31. Any questions or comments on general fund before we move forward? Don't really have any comments prepared for street or sanitation. Both of those funds are doing well. I did want just to kind of mention a couple of things in the airport fund. If you will turn over to that page, you can see at the end of July we're running a net deficit or a net expense, and I just kind of wanted to get the council to thinking about this as we head into the budget season. We've talked about in the committee meeting a potential loss of about $100,000 a year in revenue to the airport fund, and that would be a significant hit if that does happen. So we just kind of need to have that on our minds and think about airport funding going forward, because I think it needs to be addressed. You know, we've hoped that the fuel sale would be kind of the engine that keeps that vehicle running. We're always going to sell it at a profit, but it's just not been quite enough margin for what we need. The airport's kind of like sanitation. You know, we say when we spend money in sanitation, we spend quite a bit of money. And when we spend money at the airport, it's usually on upgrades and facility expansions and improvements that are pretty large ticket items. So far we're, we're in year 8 of operating the airport ourselves. And we have a respectable fund balance, a little over $478,000 in the bank. But that's really, after 8 years, that's really not even enough to do a major project upgrade if we needed to pay for it just strictly out of the city's pocket, so to speak. So I'm not saying we're in trouble. I'm not saying that, we need to take immediate action on anything, but I just want us to kind of have that in our minds going forward, that we may need to look at, maybe changing rental fees, or looking at other revenue sources, or changing our fuel margins that we charge, and hopefully maybe get that airport a little bit on more solid ground going forward, to where they can save up and plan for major upgrades without having to go, like we did on this T hangar, without having to go to the bank and get a 5-year loan that the airport itself can't even afford to pay back. So
That's fair.
that's all I've got, Mayor.
I make a motion to approve the monthly financials.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the monthly financials ending July 31st, 2021. There's no further questions. Mr. Garrett.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed.
Passes 8-0. Well, next we have the community development portion. Mr. Hawkins, do you want to handle it from there, or do you want me to handle it? You tell me.
Mr. Mayor, it does not make me any difference. It might be easier for you to see the people who are out there. So why don't you go ahead and take it if you don't mind?
All right. Well, the first item tonight is a resolution to approve the bid for construction of the airport's maintenance hangar. Mr. Jack Bell will step to the podium, please, sir.
This on? Yes. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's kind of tough to follow that when he's talking about we're about to go broke out there. So I hope it's not as bad as he lets on. We have had 3-4 months now of record fuel sales, but as Tyler says, when you're making about less than $1 a gallon, it takes a lot. So anyway, we're pedaling as fast as we can. What we have tonight is a resolution to approve a low bid for a very exciting project that we hope goes in out the airport. You know about this. This is number 3 or 4 step in this process. This will award the low bid for the construction of the airport maintenance hangar. Will's Construction got the low bid for this, and I would recommend that we accept the low bid.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second to approve this resolution for the bid for the construction of the airport maintenance hangar. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed.
Passes 8-0. Thank you, Mr. Bell.
Thank you very much.
Next, we have a resolution setting a public hearing to discuss the closing of a portion of a utility easement in the crossing at Audubon Subdivision. Mr. Walden, would you please come up, sir?
Yes, this was submitted by Mr. Atkinson, and this is basically the first step in that process, simply to set the public hearing, and then y'all will take it under advisement at the under next reading. So,
I make a motion to set this public hearing and to adopt the resolution.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve this resolution, setting a public hearing for September 14th, 2021 at 6:30 PM to discuss the closing of a portion of a utility easement in the crossing at Audubon Subdivision. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Passes 8-0. Next up is an ordinance to approve the fiscal year 2021 funding for the Community Development Block Grant Program. And Ms. Rogers.
Hello. This ordinance is for appropriating the funds for the program year 2021 for CDBG in the amount of $488,000 and for $488,416. The biggest difference is the rental and utility assistance. As you all may know, we just completed our 5-year con plan, and that was one of the main priorities in the con plan. So normally we weren't able to do rental and utility assistance, but we received a mega waiver from HUD that allowed us to do this. So I'm just asking for you all to approve.
What's a mega waiver? That sounds big.
Well, due to the pandemic, they gave us a waiver to do it this past year, and they gave us a waiver that would go through 2022. And that's one of the needs that we did see come out. So we're excited about that, being able to help our community.
Thank you.
Make a motion to waive 3 readings.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 8-0.
Thank you.
Make a motion for adoption of
Second.
the ordinance.
I have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance to approve the funding for CDBG program. Any further discussion?
I am so happy to see that rent utility assistance. in there.
Yeah.
That's great,
Thank you. Thank you all.
because you did a good job before.
Yeah,
Oh,
she's-
thank you. I'm excited. Theo.
Mr. Garrett.
Okay, this will be ordinance 02185. Mr. Grimes? Aye. Mr. Pruitt? Aye. Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Jones? Yes. Mr. Ledbetter? Yes. Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Passes 8-0. I went to Pastor Maltby's daughter's wedding, very beautiful wedding, and Pastor was working Shawana to death, and I called Pastor off the side. I said, "You do realize she's not on your payroll anymore." He didn't care. He didn't care. All right, next up, we have a request to approve the nomination of Adam Bell, fine young man, for the Conway Planning Commission. Mr. Walden, would you like to share anything about it? Just, I think you all know Adam, Scotty and Debbie's son.
Yes,
Oh,
and
Conway.
we had a recent resignation on the planning commission. So we kind of went back to the drawing board, said, let's try to follow the Blue Ribbon Commission ordinance as closely as possible. So that in that, we went back to our 2020 submissions, went to our next pick on the list, and it was Adam. And I think he'll be a great commissioner.
One thing, did you mention to him about the commitment that it takes to be at the meetings and so forth? After we just discussed.
Yeah,
this last meeting?
he's very aware.
Okay, great, thank you.
I'll call his mom if he doesn't show up.
I make a motion to approve this nominee.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve Adam Bell for the Conway Planning Commission. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed?
Passes 8-0. Next up, we have consideration to approve the impact fee credit agreement for the Conrad Court Subdivision. Mr. Walden.
Yes, we brought this to you for a first reading in June. Essentially, with the impact fee credit agreement, when anyone builds a street to a collector or above standard, they're entitled to get back some of the impact fee, basically get credits for that. Because when a person builds a house, they pay an impact fee. with that, that is supposed to pay for, citywide improvements. So it's, because they're going above and beyond, they get that back. The estimate for this was reviewed by the Transportation Department. They were comfortable with it, and so it's essentially what the developer's entitled to.
Council, back to you.
I make a motion to approve this impact fee credit.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the impact fee credit agreement for the Conrad Corp subdivision. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All
Aye.
opposed?
Passes 8-0. Next, we have an ordinance requesting to annex property located at 21 Mill Pond Road to be zoned A1. This is the Wynn Thompson property, and Mr. Walden's here to speak to it.
Yes, so the applicant came before the planning commission. The reason why they're seeking annexation is they're having a lot of trouble getting power from Entergy, and obviously we've got a wonderful utility corporation, nonprofit corporation in our city that could provide them power, and so they wanted to be annexed into the city to get that.
This is the property with the big barn and big white house on it, I think, isn't it? Just south of Robert Downey's property. Yeah.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a
Second.
second to waive the 3 readings. Is that correct, Ms. Smith?
It's an ordinance.
Okay. I have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Passes 8-0.
Make a motion for the adoption of the ordinance.
Second.
Have a
What number
motion.
is that, Mr. Garrett? Thank you.
I have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance to annex property located at 21 Mill Pond Road to A1. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter? Mr. Grimes? Mr. Jones? Mr. Pruitt? Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
And Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Passes 8-0. Next up, we have an ordinance requesting to rezone property located at 640 and 680 Hogan Lane from O2 to C2. And Mr. Walden will speak to this.
This item and the next item are both connected to the same property. We have an individual that is wanting to construct essentially an indoor storage facility on Hogan Lane, just south of the Come and Go there, that's out there in West Conway. At the planning commission meeting, we really didn't see any opposition to the request. All the conditions, the applicant was okay with all the conditions that were imposed. They're fairly standard conditions, but I do want to note that this is going to be essentially an indoor storage facility.
Where exactly is 640 and 680? Okay, right there, kind of behind Come and Go. Okay.
Make a motion that we waive the 3 readings.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Passes 8-0.
Make a motion for adoption.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance to rezone property located at 640 and 680 Hogan Lane from O2 to C2. Any further discussion?
How many units do they plan to put there, Mr. Walden?
I am not exactly sure. They plan to use quite a bit of the site. It will be an indoor facility, though.
100% indoor, no storage of trailers and boats and stuff like that outdoors?
No, not as far as we're aware. Condition 9 says any outside storage, including vehicles, recreational vehicles, equipment. If there is any storage at all, it would have to be screened from the right of way.
Okay, very good. That's what I wanted to make sure of.
No, we did not have anybody show up or any comments submitted.
Can you explain to me condition number 7? Why that was included?
That is part of a regulation that I borrowed from another community. You would be surprised, but sometimes people will treat a storage unit as a shop. So I rented one time, and a guy would take his car out there and work on it in his storage unit. So he had that was where his garage was.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Garrett.
This be ordinance 02187. Ms. Mel? Aye. Mr. Ledbetter? Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Mr. Pruitt? Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Passes 8-0. Next, we have consideration to approve the request for conditional use permit to allow storage facility in the C2 zoning district for property located at 640 and 680 Hogan. Mr. Walden.
Yeah, this is the same under consideration. This is the conditional use to allow that specific use in that zone. Whenever we consider something like this, we try to go the most restrictive means possible, meaning to what is the most that would protect the neighborhood. And so while they could have sought a different zoning, we advise them to go to C2 and require conditional use so that it would protect the neighborhood.
Make a motion, we approve this conditional use permit.
Second.
I have a motion and a second that we approve this conditional use permit for a storage facility with C2 zoning for property located at 640 and 680 Hogan Lane. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed?
Passes 8-0. Big night for you, Mr. Walden. Next up, we have an ordinance to amend the Conway zoning code concerning short-term rentals for transient occupation.
Yeah, so that's such a technical term for Airbnb and VRBO. It's essentially what that is. We were approached by a group of residents in the community that were concerned about an Airbnb or VRBO that was in their neighborhood. It is an issue that cities across our state and frankly across the nation are increasingly working to address. I'll preface this by saying that if there's any discomfort with this, I'm not in any hurry to get this adopted immediately. We're just trying to move it forward for consideration if y'all want to take more time to look at it. Essentially how this would work is it is sort of I would call a light touch regulation. In terms of looking at this, the intent of taking a light touch to it is we've gotten certain complaints that revolve around parties or things going on in Airbnbs, and so this is more about finding one of the least restrictive means of going about and regulating them to see if that will address the issues that have arisen. And if it's something that doesn't, then that's something we can revisit the regulations in the future. If there are things about this that are problematic, additionally, we can revisit it in the future. So I always, when I think about regulation, we'll say, in some ways is a policy testing pot for how you approach this. Major features of it is requiring licensure. So they would have to submit annual licenses to the city clerk's office. Essentially what we would have to do following adoption of this ordinance is find a means. There are various companies that have lists of all the Airbnbs and VRBOs. They aggregate that data through different means. Do that, send out notification to those folks that are operating those, letting them know they need to get licensed. We have certain requirements for carrying general liability insurance. It would need to be inspected to make sure that they have things like GFCI outlets inside, that it's a sort of a safe accommodation. There'd be some limitations on sort of the number of sleeping rooms that would be allowed and the number of occupants in that. Again, part of that would be based on their fire inspection determined by occupancy. They would have to renew that license every year. And after a certain point, I think around May 1st, if they have not renewed their license, then it would be considered revoked. And so with that, it would be re-inspected every year. So there's a safety aspect to that. The other thing that I think is one of the major things that's really important about this as well is requiring a local property representative. So they would have a local property representative on file. That information would be reported to the Conway Police Department. So when a complaint occurred, that information would be available. They could then contact the individual that's supposed to be responsible for the property, and they could intervene and address whatever issue. So if it's people are partying out there, we've gotten complaints about that, we can do that. They're required to maintain that local property representative information, keep it on file, keep it up to date. If they don't do that, or if they have, you know, 2 or more complaints within a 12-month period that they have failed to respond to in a timely manner, then that's something that their short-term rental license can be revoked. They can appeal that. That appeal would come to you all as the city council to review, basically on a factual, have they complied with what the regulations are. They would also be required to provide information to everybody that stays there, essentially like a booklet that goes on the coffee table that says, here's what the rules are. Don't park in the neighbor's yard. Put the trash in the trash can. Don't put the trash on the yard. Don't throw trash over the neighbor's fence, things like that. Don't throw beer cans here. Those types of things. And so these would be for single-family homes, single-family dwellings. Those are what Airbnbs, if you've ever stayed in one, are. If it were in a different type of unit, then it would go with and follow what would be required for a bed and breakfast. So,
I was in the meeting with Mr. Walden and the group, and it was an established neighborhood with families, and it was a lot of what Mr. Walden just mentioned. We had folks parking in other people's driveways and up and down the street, shooting fireworks after midnight, drinking, and you know, just kind of being loud. So. I know Hot Springs has addressed this. This is something that you are seeing not only in Arkansas but nationwide. But we've got a few more B&Bs showing up than I first realized till I kind of got involved in this. But anyway, like Mr. Walden said, if y'all want to look at this a little further, you can, or we can adopt it tonight.
Mr. Walden,
yes, sir.
Oh, sorry. I'll come back.
do we collect sales? Would we collect sales tax from people staying in those as an Airbnb?
One of the requirements with the licensure is to provide their essentially license or certificate or whatever related to A&P tax. So they would have to provide documentation that they're registered as an A&P tax.
And I also heard you say that Mr. Garrett was going to be in charge of taking care of all this stuff. Mr. Garrett, how many people are you going to need?
I think 7 or 8 should be sufficient. Now, we don't expect it to be a huge number. We're not really sure, but right now, Denise in my office and myself, we're prepared to take it on.
Better rip them.
Yeah, just one question. Are we having a big problem with this already?
We've had some complaints, yes. I don't know, I'd say big, Mr. Jones, but yeah, we've had some complaints and they were, I can understand why they were concerned.
Well, and in fairness to other entities that provide lodging and who follow all the rules and pay the A&P sales tax, and these are pretty reasonable in terms of requirements, you know, kind of the basics. Maybe tonight we consider this the first reading, and then that gives people time to, and then we can have it on the agenda again next time.
Okay. Would you like to do that? Okay, so this is the first time I've done this. So do we need to agree to waive the 3 readings?
No,
No.
Okay, so you just do.
No.
All right. So this
no,
will be.
this would be the first
This will
reading.
be our first reading, and City Attorney Charles Finkenbinder is going to read the ordinance.
So this is gonna take a little time, and I'm gonna read the entire proposed ordinance. So this would.
I think you can just. I think we do title
yeah.
only.
Can we wait for reading the table for next meeting?
You can table it. I mean, you can,
For the second vote.
you can waive the 3, you can waive the 3 readings. You can have 2 readings instead. It's not one or the other. It's not either you have 3 readings or you don't have any readings. Does that make sense?
You're gonna read the whole thing. I'd say let's wait for reading this table.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. I have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Passes 8-0.
And I'm moving table.
I have a motion and a second to table until the next council meeting. All in favor say aye. Any
Aye.
opposed? Passes 8-0. You think Mr. Grimes, Mrs. Owen?
I think he just didn't want to hear me speak.
But he didn't make it sound like that though, did he?
Two.
Yes, we'll see to it that we get it online. Okay. Next up, we have our Public Service Committee, which is the Physical Plant, Parks and Rec, and Sanitation. Let's see here. First up, we have a resolution here authorizing the mayor to enter into an independent contractor agreement for the watering of the hanging flowers throughout downtown Conway. I will let Mr. Spencer Clausen educate us all on this.
We've got several hanging baskets around town. I know y'all are all aware of those, and Physical Plant maintains those. We are trying to get this independent contractor agreement taken care of so that Will Kennedy, who has been watering all year, he retired in August. We'd like for him to come back and finish this out this year to honor our commitment up to this point for watering these flowers. There's almost 386 to 400 flowers, potted plants, and Will's got to water them. It takes roughly 8 hours a day. They are spread out all over downtown, and there's really a whole lot that goes into it that you might not think about. And Will's the right man for this job. Like I said, he's been doing it for years now, and I would really like to see this get taken care of so that he can continue to water them, and we can wrap up this year.
So moved.
And I know there'll be some questions. Will is, like I said, he's retired. I know that Spencer is shorthanded right now. We're having trouble citywide hiring people in the Parks Department and Physical Plant, Police, and Fire. So he is shorthanded. So I'm concerned that he's not going to be able to get this. I know we'll just open this up for discussion.
All I want to say, I mean, how much is it going to be for the remainder of this year?
The remainder of this year, the way this is worded, it's $710 a week, looking at roughly 2.5 months of watering. And we will pull the flowers around November the 5th.
Okay. I mean, I don't mind finishing out this year, but I would like to see what we're going to do for next year instead of making an agreement to do this for
It's
next year.
expensive.
Very expensive. And I know the Conway Development Corporation buys the plants. Is that correct?
I think Chamber does.
Oh, the chamber, it says Conway Development Corporation on this agreement. But I would like to look at that before we commit to anything for next year.
Okay, that's fine. And
Yeah.
we'll talk about it at budget time.
Okay.
Okay, no, I don't disagree with that. Mr. Hawkins, did you make a motion? I'm sorry, sir.
I did, yes. I made a motion to accept the proposal that's before us. Resolution.
Okay, I have a motion, and a second to approve this resolution and to enter into agreement for watering of the hanging flowers throughout downtown Conway for the remainder of this year. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
This will be resolution R2171. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed.
Passes 8-0. Thanks, Spencer.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you.
You're doing a good job shorthanded too, by the way.
I appreciate that. We are. It's tough right now. These temperatures are killing them. So thank you all very much.
Thank you. Next up, we have an ordinance to appropriate funds and approve the bid construction of the Stonedown Creek Trail from Mimosa to Donny Avenue for Parks and Rec, and Mr. Ibbotson.
We're asking y'all to accept the low bid from JCI for this, and our Department of Transportation will be performing all the construction inspection on this project.
Make a motion to waive 3 readings.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Passes 8-0.
Make a motion for adoption of the ordinance.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance to appropriate funds and approve bids for construction of the Stonedown Creek Trail from Mimosa to Donaghy. Any further discussion?
You have plenty of money in your parks project, Mr. Ibbotson?
This is coming out of Parks Impact. And in your financial statement tonight, our balance is $922,000. So
Thank you.
yes.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Does this say it's going under Donny?
It does.
So we're taking
At the,
two Donny.
at the bridge,
Okay.
under,
All right.
yes, sir.
All right, just want to make sure we're going under Donny.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Okay. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
This will be ordinance 02188. Mr. Pruitt, Miss Mel, Mr. Grimes, Mr. Hawkins,
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter, Miss Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Jones, Miss Isby.
Yes.
Passes 8-0. Steve, did that wear you out? You all just sat down. You still got sat down. Next up, we have a resolution to approve the bid for construction of an additional pavilion at Fifth Avenue Park. Mr. Ibbotson.
Yes, sir. We're asking you to take the bid of Han, which is not the low bid, due to the fact that the low bid cannot deliver within the time frame of our funding. They wouldn't be able to get it to us until February of next year, which is out of our funding cycle.
I make a motion for the adoption of the resolution for Han Enterprises.
I have a motion and a second to approve this resolution, to approve the bid for construction of additional pavilion at Fifth Avenue Park. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
This will be Resolution R 2172. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed.
Passes 8-0. The next one, we need to rethink how we're gonna say this. I don't know if, I'll ask Mr. Finkenbinder if this requires any action of the council. We were just, I think if I understood it, where we left it at the committee meeting, we're just gonna ask Ms. Bryce to ask them if they will give us some more time, where the council can actually walk through the building and get an idea if the council's even interested in that. So, do we need to do anything? Okay, all right, we'll move to the next item then. Next is public safety, and next up is resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement to acquire property located at 1203 North Museum Road. So I guess we're gonna do that the same way. If you would, Jamie, touch base with the owners and see if we can do a walkthrough, and if the council is agreeing to that, then we will come back to them with an offer. Does that sound right, council? All right, good deal. Finally, we have an ordinance to appropriate funds for fire safety promotional products for the fire department. Chief Winter.
Got to me a little quicker. Good evening, council. We've received a check from Centennial Bank for $5,000 to help us purchase fire safety material for Fire Prevention Month in the schools. We're just asking for acceptance of that.
Make a motion to waive 3 readings.
I have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye. Any
Aye.
opposed? Passes 8-0.
Make a motion for the adoption of the ordinance.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance that appropriates funds for fire safety promotional products. Any further discussion? It's good stuff here, Mike. Mr. Garrett.
This will be ordinance O 2189. Mr. Hawkins,
Yes.
Mr. Pruitt, Miss Smith, Miss Mel, Miss Isby, Mr. Jones, Mr. Grimes, Mr. Ledbetter.
Passes 8-0. Would you get Mr. Ledbetter one of those coloring books? He likes those.
And the crayons.
Next up is consideration to approve the disposal of seized assets for the police department. Chief Tapley.
Hello. This one's real easy. We're asking to be able to dispose of some assets that we have received through seizures that we have no use for. We would like to put those up for auction on public surplus.
So. Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve this consideration to approve the disposal of seized assets for the Conway Police Department. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed.
Passes 8-0. And our last item tonight is an ordinance appropriating reimbursements funds for the Conway Police Department. Chief Tapley.
Yes, we've received reimbursements for extra duty services, insurance proceeds, and task force funds for our task force officers, and we're just asking that you accept those and put those in the appropriate accounts.
Make a motion that we waive the 3 readings.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 8-0.
Make a motion for the adoption of the ordinance.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance to appropriate reimbursement funds to the Conway Police Department. Any other discussion? Mr. Garrett.
This will be ordinance O 2190. Miss Isby, Mr. Grimes, Miss Mel, Mr. Jones, Mr. Hawkins,
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter? Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Pruitt?
Passes 8-0. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Council, as a reminder, I think Ms. Isby's already mentioned it. We have 2 aquatic workshops on Thursday, August 26th, one at 5:30 and then one at 7:30. And then we go back to our regular council meetings next month. So we'll start back meeting the 2nd and the 4th. Yes, sir, Mr. West. Oh, yes, okay.
Bike crash on Saturday, and he's in the hospital. Was supposed to get out today. He passed all the tests and leave, but due to the extent of his injuries, doc wanted to keep him one time. He has broke every rib on his right side, C7 fracture, and lung. So, but he should get out tomorrow. Should come home, but he's gonna be in the C collar for a while. So, pretty good spirits considering how bad he's beat up. But did he have a crash? No, he had a crash coming down a hill.
Yeah.
Into a ravine.
And this guy, you can't slow him down. He was actually in the emergency room and he texted me and gave a thumbs up. And then he texted and said he was going to be back at work tomorrow. So I told my wife, we're getting a stationary bike because if we had a wreck like that, we'd be dead.
It might take him a little while to get next week, but he's at least hopefully we'll get home this week.
Yeah.
But overall, his spirits are pretty high considering.
The council, have any of y'all been able to drive by Prince Street and see the new, what did we?
Oh yeah, the Pompey Park.
There was over 200 kids out there this weekend. Yeah.
It's great.
I'm gonna take my dirt bike out there and get some of that.
Don't do it. Don't do it.
I just kidding. All right, council, that's all I have tonight.
If you
Yes,
would
sir.
indulge me for 15 seconds, I would just like to state that I appreciate the fact that this body can gather and deliberate civilly, and we can discuss things, and even when we don't agree, we can be agreeable, and we can get things done, and I appreciate that.
Absolutely, and we have some interesting things came, even when Mr. Jones calls me names, it didn't hurt my feelings that too bad. But, that council, that I'll take a motion to adjourn. We're adjourned. Thank you.